Hey, everybody, welcome to the Friday News Lunch from the Bucks County Beacon. I'm Kevin Mahoney, and each week we serve up the week's top stories affecting our communities and the nation. Today I'm joined once again by the owner and publisher of the Beacon, Emily Smith. Yes, we're here for another power lunch this week, and it couldn't come as a better time, or a more stressful time, if we're being real. If we're being real about this one. We hope you'll join us live every Friday at noon on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, X, or right on the Beacon's website at buckscountybeacon.com. And look, if you haven't already, right, well, you need to check out the Beacon's 2024 Voters Guide. Just go to buckscountybeacon.com and click on that big banner at the top. And look, you're not going to find a better place to get information that you need to cast your vote this coming Tuesday. November 5th. And while you're over there on the Bucks County Beacon's website, well, take a moment to click on the Support the Beacon button and become a supporter. You become a monthly supporter for as little as $5 a month, yearly supporter for as little as $50 a year. Come on, or you can drop a one-time donation to support locally grown, independent, progressive media. Well, I wish we could say this week we were served with some fulfilling and nutritious sustenance that helps democracies flourish. Nope. Instead, we are here just 4 days before the election, feeling a little bit sick to our stomachs, right? But optimistic. We're going to keep it going. So what happened this week? Well, way too much to mention is here, but we'll knock off a few of them. Trump campaign led off the week with a racist, misogynist America First rally at Madison Square Garden, while comedian Tony Hinchcliffe's opening set captured a lot of the headlines, calling Puerto Rico a floating island of garbage, denigrating immigrants, Latinos, and black people with 1950s-style racist tropes, and calling up racist, anti-Semitic, and misogynist references all the time. Oh yeah, denigrating Palestinians and Jews. Yeah, you got it all. Well, the racism misogyny was woven throughout the entire program, not just his opening remarks, and that included the remarks from Trump. And as Trump and his supporters continue to ramp up threats of violence and what they call the enemy within, the closer we get to Election Day. And a particularly violent threat, Trump took aim at former Republican Representative Liz Cheney in a Q&A with Tucker Carlson. And that just took place like in Arizona last night, right? Trump said of Cheney, right, talking about her being a war hawk, when he said, hey, let's put her with a rifle standing there with 9 barrels shooting at her, okay? Let's see how she feels about it. You know, when the guns are trained on her face. Yeah, now they kind of were quick to write it off as kind of, oh, yeah, he was talking about her being a war hawk. But we know what the second meaning of that is. He's very, very upset with her, you see. Jamelle Bouie had a great piece in the New York Times today underscoring the stakes of the election. And Donald Trump is done with checks and balances. Bouie argues that voters will be choosing not just between candidates, but between theories of power. It's a great piece. Go check it out. And in Green Bay, Wisconsin this week, Trump seemed to want to underscore what he thinks about consent in his relationships with women. He said he told his advisors he wanted to protect women and that he's going to do it whether women like it or not. Cue the intro music to The Handmaid's Tale, shall we? And so maybe this explains why Republican Brian Fitzpatrick continues to avoid voters and refuse to debate his Democratic challenger Ashley Ehasz. Kirsten Zolfo explains in her new article in the Beacon this week that, quote, only 1% of Fitzpatrick's money comes from small donors, while a whopping 92.5% comes from out of state. Well, now we know who Fitzpatrick's true constituents are. And writing in the Bucks County Beacon, Carter Walker from VoteBeat PA reports on attempts by hundreds of mail ballot challenges targeting Bucks, Chester, Montgomery, and Delaware counties. Conservative Philly-based news outlet Broad and Liberty reported that most of the challenges are targeting Democratic voter applications. Now, they didn't say who was doing it, but VoteBeat and Spotlight PA were able to confirm with the Bucks County Board of Elections that all of the 191 challenges came from the same person. It's coming from inside the house, folks. And a PA judge ordered Bucks County to extend its mail ballot deadline to 5 p.m. today. That's after the Trump campaign claimed that the Board of Elections turned away voters who were in line to request mail ballots before a deadline on Tuesday. Seemed to me like a big media stunt, something to kind of make sure that they could kind of claim grievance, setting the predicate for what they plan after the election. Well, remember that lawsuit by Republicans, Republican Scott Perry? Remember Representative Scott Perry? Yep, his 5 other Republican cronies that sought to create barriers for mail-in ballots from overseas military personnel? Well, U.S. District Court just threw out the lawsuit saying there were no grounds to sue. And anyways, it's way too close to the election to make any significant changes in the way that we do elections. So there you have it. That is just a sampling from this week's news. So Emily, it's so great to be sitting here with you once again. I have to admit, my personal stress and anxiety levels are a little bit heightened today. Not only just with the election, I'm also a judge of elections in my precinct, and hoping that everything is going to go clear. But how are you doing in the midst of all this?
I'm stressed too. Being a woman, I'm not looking to get protected by Donald Trump.
No, you don't think?
No, not this year or next year or the year after that.
Or ever.
Or ever. Yeah. I'm not sure he's a very good protector. So yeah, I'm a little stressed out about that. And I am volunteering at the polls on election day for a couple hours. I am an elected official, so I feel like it is my duty to show up and see my constituents on election day. So I will be there greeting people. I hope your judge of elections situation goes well. That is a very underappreciated job. People don't really understand how much time it takes.
Yeah.
And what a serious responsibility it is.
Well, I'm lucky enough to be at a polling place that has some really good people that have been working there for quite some time. And, I'm thankful more now than ever about, the past several years of like having the benefit of people who've been working these polling places for so long and have just, just can help with the process and all that. It's like, really, I kind of like did a last minute step into, or it was a write-in campaign because nobody was running for judge of elections the last time round. And I was like, holy crap. I mean, and it made me, I was like, oh, I'm going to throw it, I'm going to go learn it. And it is, as you said, it's a lot of work. But, in most of these cases, I've been voting at this polling place for, as long as I've lived in Percy. And they, the people there have always had their eyes on what we're trying to do here is we're just trying to make sure that people get the right to vote and we can help them. We run into any problems, which is what it should be.
Yeah.
So we're keeping our fingers crossed that continues.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, I feel like people don't even know about those elected positions, judge of elections, inspector of elections. And then there's this new separate one called poll observers, which isn't elected. It's like a volunteer thing.
Yeah, that it could be appointed by parties or kind of individuals could sign up to be these poll watchers through organizations. Yeah.
And that's actually the one that worries me the most. So, everyone should sign up for whatever they can to participate in democracy because that's the important part.
100%. 100%. And, and this is, it's one of those things where, we've heard this 1,000 times over now about, democracy's on the ballot this time around. And this is part of what democracy looks like. Like, really, it's the mundane, everyday work that goes into making sure that these institutions do what they're supposed to do. And that are accessible and available for all of us. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, that's what's happened in the polling place. But just I'm curious. Like, this is one of the biggest elections of our time. Obviously, I mean, I hate having to say this every single 2 years or 3 years now, 4 years. It seems like every actually. On cycle, off cycle, doesn't even matter anymore. No. But this one seems to be pretty significant. And, the Beacon has been there covering the candidates and the issues like all throughout this. But, I'm just curious, what does it look like from your end? Well, what's the Beacon prepared to do as we kind of like approach election day?
Yeah, so we already put out our voter guide a couple weeks ago. I hope everyone has checked it out because that was a very large undertaking to build and fill with all of the information that we found. People don't understand how much time that stuff takes.
Well, I'll tell you, there's no other place that has the detail that is in that voter's guide. I mean, literally, I mean, I remember when I first moved to Bucks County, trying to find information about, who was running. And usually what you get is you get candidate like stump statements, which sound all the same regardless of party. I'm here to represent the people. We're freedom, democracy, blah, 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 blah. But you don't really know about the backgrounds and policies. This voter's guide actually gets people usable information, right? Well, they say, okay, here's where the differences are. Here's where the distinctions are. And this is why I might want to support this candidate.
Yeah, I mean, I tried really hard when we were putting together the information to make it like a job interview,
Yeah.
right? Like I hire people, people hire people all the time. They apply for jobs, they understand how it works. What are your qualifications for this position? So that's how I approached it so that it would be very straightforward and not just what are the politicians saying on every site. You can go look at it because we linked to everything that we could
Yep.
find on them. And then also linked to all of the articles that we have covering anything with them. Obviously, some of the, off party candidates, we don't have much information for, but I tried.
Yep.
And we just started this week doing a series of articles that Aiden has been writing for us about what the different elected positions are and what they do. So we had the Attorney General piece come out earlier this week. And then this afternoon, we're publishing what does the Auditor General do, which is probably the biggest question anyone's going to have when they go to vote on Tuesday is what the hell is an Auditor General? What do they do? So we'll be publishing that this afternoon. And then we have a couple more that we're going to get in before the election. And then lastly, very exciting, we've had this partnership with the AP through grants from the Knight Foundation and other, democracy saving institutions that have given us lots of content from the AP. So you've probably seen the polls that we've published and some of the articles from the AP, but the best part is their live calls on races, their data visualizations, and different polling information. So on election day, our voter guide is going to come with, once you open it up on Tuesday, it's going to have all of the races with their data visualizations about who's winning and whatever, the balance of power in the United States, live calls, all the stuff.
That's freaking amazing. That is absolutely amazing. So instead of having to kind of like navigate my way to the Board of Elections website and scroll through all this kind of stuff, right? Which again, it's good data, but in terms of its presentation and usability for like everyday people,
Yeah,
it's frustrating. So that's amazing. I mean, I can't wait. That's so now you got like basically one-stop shopping for all your kind of election needs. Go to buckscountybeacon.com for your voter's guide. And it'll be that same link. It'll be the voter's guide, click it with the visualizations. Awesome.
Yeah, that's where I plan to put it, but we'll probably put an article out too with the balance of power and like, some kind of, live updates. That's the hope.
Fantastic. Well, everybody make sure that you're bookmarking that now, and make sure that you're going to check it out on election night. I know that's going to be on my phone then, if we get any breaks in the flood of voters that everyone is expecting to show up at the polls, that'll be definitely refreshing the buckscountybeacon.com's website to make sure I'm getting the latest details.
Yeah, I'm really excited for it. I hope everyone checks it out. And the best part is that now that we have this, I mean, hopefully the AP is able to continue this through more election cycles than this. Because I would love to have we'll definitely have the voter guide because I built that separately, but I'd love to have these same data visualizations from the AP going forward with our more local elections. That will be quite an undertaking though, because as you know, there's 10 times as many candidates when it's a municipal election.
Yep.
So.
Yep. Exactly. And, and again, in some ways it it's a lot more work in getting that information for that. And not just in terms of like the number of candidates, but really you don't have like the deep, and again, some of the newer candidates that come up, you don't have the same, but you don't have like a reservoir of kind of like documents and news articles that you can kind of pull from to do this. Because a lot of times you're talking about, folks who are kind of just in the community. They're not kind of like, in the news all the time. Well, how do we get to those folks? And the only way you do it is like, old school, right?
Yeah.
And that's it. That means you need local kind of reporting. You need local kind of journalism. You need a place like the buckscountybeacon.com. There you go. So if I
Yeah.
need to put the plug in, I'll put it in 1,000 times during today. You hit that supportthebeacon.com. Go support the beacon on the buckscountybeacon.com and help support this kind of vital resource here for our community and our democracy, frankly. So.
Speaking of support the beacon, I just rebuilt our contribution page.
I saw it. It looks great.
Thank you. Thank you. We had been using a third-party vendor. We're still using Stripe. Stripe is, the big guy, the big daddy when it comes to payment processing on the internet. But we integrated it directly into our website a little bit better than sending people off to another link on a third party. So hopefully everyone goes and contributes, so I don't feel like my time was wasted on that.
Indeed. It's great. Big yellow button, upper right hand side. You click on that big yellow button, you kind of go right in there. It gives you all your options, like easy peasy, folks. Easy peasy. So you're sitting around, you're stressed out, you're wondering what else you can do to kind of like ahead of the election that you haven't already done, and that's not on the list. Well, go ahead and go tick that box and go over there and become a member as soon as you can. So Emily, I think it's just best way to handle some of this stuff is just to kind of talk about just it all together. I mean, like at the national level, things just, really, they went all in. The Republicans, the Trump campaign, and they went all in to go in the racism, the misogyny, the threats, and I don't know, 10 years ago, I might have said, yeah, this campaign just went off the rails. So
Right.
no, they just told us which way they're going.
Right. It would be like an October surprise if a candidate had said any one of these number of things or any of their surrogates. But now it's all of the things from the same candidate and his surrogates. And each one of them blows my mind. Literally everything he's saying. It's like they're doubling down on hate, which it's baffling. It's baffling.
Yeah, and they, the fact that they open it up with it's been wild to seeing what the campaign does after. I think that I legitimately think that the campaign went into that say, oh yeah, we got it. We're going to kind of rile everybody. This is going to be great, and weren't quite prepared for the degree of the blowback and the backlash that came from that. I knew that they expected it. Like it was all about let's own the liberals. Let's get them all kind of riled up, but. Then just showed you they didn't give any thought at all to the actual people they were making reference to. And, there's some really good interviews with some Puerto Rican voters in Philadelphia, for example, who had been, several of them that were interviewed. I don't know if it was like ABC News down there or whatever it might be, but, there were other news outlets that were interviewing people and saying, I was thinking about voting for Trump, but I don't, I always kind of dismissed it as kind of, oh yeah, he just kind of things off the cuff. She's like, but they're like, no, this is a direct attack on me and my people. Like they just denigrated everything about our community. There's no way I'm going to vote for this guy now.
Well, and I think it's good that the attention has been brought to it so that the Puerto Ricans can say, I remember what happened with Hurricane Maria.
Exactly.
And the crap that Trump said. It's good to remember that, not this like fantastic economy or whatever during the Trump administration, which I do not remember. But I think it's important to remember that he's like, oh, you guys are spending too much money. We'll get you some money, but
exactly.
You didn't have that many deaths, right? Like compared to a real hurricane like Katrina or something. The things he said then were so offensive, and he was a sitting president of the United States.
Yep.
So I am glad that that's coming back into the common memory of the people in the United States and specifically Puerto Ricans. Um, but yeah, it's insane. It's
I,
insane.
I mean, it is. And, if anything, if there was one, well, from my perspective at least, one of the negative aspects of having that Tony Hinchcliffe up front. I mean, negative not in terms of like denigration of all these people. That's horribly negative, but because his like opening bit was so freaking offensive,
Yeah.
so overtly racist,
Yeah.
right? That the rest of what happened during that whole little celebration that they had there and kind of like recalling the history of the racist rallies that took place in Madison Square Garden ahead of time, right? I mean,
Nazi
all that stuff.
sympathizers. Yeah.
Totally. Right. I mean, well, I remember there was like all this reporting in the news media the week before. They're like, why is he going to New York? This is just weird. Right? It's just weird because he's been denigrating New York. He's saying, I'm leaving New York. I turned my back on them. They've done me wrong. Also, like, why is he going back there? And then you're like, oh yeah, the Nazi rally in 1939. Oh yeah, the Klan's American First rally with it. Right? You're like, it's just baked into. I think, again, I don't care if it's like Trump has it deeply in his mind. No, his campaign totally knows what that's about. Stephen
I mean,
Miller totally
Stephen
knows what that's
Miller,
about.
right?
Right. Yes,
Stephen
exactly.
Miller.
Right. And so I'm like, oh, like this is your signaling to your shock troops, right? About making sure that they know kind of which side that you're on. Right. So
Yeah.
I don't know, but it's like, even at the end, one of my friends down in Westchester was saying that, I get all the, like, how offensive is it, just unbelievable what took place at the beginning part of that. But he said one of the things that stood out to him more than anything else, like that was the most like, I don't know, sobering of it all, was Trump holding up the Bible during his speech, right? And basically talking about kind of like the devil's on the other side, right? Like in God's name. I mean, it's like the signaling of like, here's all you racist, all you kind of like white nationalists, and all you Christian nationalists that are out there. I'm your guy.
Right.
What that was all about.
Yeah. It's it's sickening. And he's a branding guy, right?
Totally.
He's made this brand, and as long as he continues to say, you know, news is all fake except for what I tell you,
Yep.
then there's going to be these same people constantly believing whatever he says and then finding some kind of supporting evidence on the right wing, um, you know, astroturf sites, Fox News, Tucker Carlson, take your pick, right? Like there's plenty of them saying things that aren't true. But then they say everything that we're saying is not true. And that makes it really, really difficult to run a news organization when no
Right.
one believes what you're saying. Um, I don't know. Have you been on Facebook this week?
Yeah, I have. More than I should have been, probably.
We got some crazies in my town.
Yeah. Yeah, I have been actively not spending a lot of time on social media as of late because of my memories of the last time round, my memories the last two times round. And I remember that for the Clinton Trump election. And like literally, I mean, I said this to Cyril last week too as well. It was just like, I had like visceral reactions to that, right? And when I start seeing all the polling that's coming out, like everything that I'm like, you know what? No, I really appreciated Michael Moore's piece on Medium about this, where he's basically saying like going through the last like 10 elections and showing what happens in terms of like what the media does with the polls and then what the results are. Um,
Right.
Now, I'm not the person that's going to dismiss all the polls and things like this, but just in terms of the obsessive attention to those polls for everyday kind of like consumers of the medium, right? It's one thing if you're in a campaign and you're looking for do this, and it's and I think it's important to remind people that this is freaking super close. That it is going to depend on people turning out. But it's been, it's a toxic space, especially since, Musk has taken over Twitter. That place is it's a shit show.
Yeah.
Pardon my expression.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's all toxic. And you see the stuff that people are putting out, and I'm like, I can't even reason with you. And then I have these other friends who are Democrats who are trying to convince people what's wrong with Trump. And it doesn't matter how many facts are there, none of it, it's all unproductive,
Mhm.
to say the least. And what I will say about elections and polls is that polls are, a representative sample, right? The thing about winning elections is it's all about voter turnout.
Yep.
That is all, right? 53% of registered voters in America are women.
Yep.
We win if we go vote.
Yep.
I mean, are there women who are going to vote for Trump? Yes. I am aware that they exist. I hope that they're a very small percentage.
No,
But
but you could offset it like this though too. Is like there's a lot of white guys that are not going to vote for Trump either. Like here's
right.
one of them, right? So I
Right.
mean, again, we don't, by looking at that 53% kind of like women voters in the country, but then also looking at the margin like that, women are, at least as the polls are like indicating, a huge margin that kind of like breaking towards Harris. I mean, that's where it matters, right? Because just like white men are not kind of like a single block, although frankly, as a white guy, I am consistently disturbed about the number of white men that are just kind of gravitate towards that as their identity. It's just incredible to me.
And that it's okay to choose what women do with their bodies.
Yeah.
I mean, this whole thing now that there was that ad, I think it's Julia Roberts, this
I
ad
was just
came
gonna
out
I was just gonna mention that. Yeah.
where she's like, you don't have to tell anyone. Your vote is secret. Like, if your husband is voting for Trump, it's okay. You can still vote for whoever you want. You don't have to tell him. And now, like, all of that right wing media is out there being like, well, that's as bad as cheating. That's as
Yeah.
bad as cheating on your husband to vote without telling him who you vote for. And that's so much bull. It's so much bull because that's the whole point of voting is that it's a secret vote.
Yep.
That's why they have those little curtains. So no one knows who you're voting for because it's your own ethics and morality that help you and information that help you choose who you're going to vote for. And that's your decision and no one else's. Just like women's decision about what to do with their bodies.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah.
There you go. Same deal. And that's why I thought those ads were so excellent.
Yeah.
Right. Because one, it just kind of it showed everybody a dynamic, right? That whether or not that say like, this is happening to me personally, I know somebody where they feel that kind of pressure and they're concerned. Right. And what was more telling was the reaction from the conservative media, right? That said, no, right. It's like, don't say that.
That's
And
bad.
exactly. And what is at stake is the control of women's bodies, minds, and votes.
Well,
right?
it's like that Tucker Carlson clip, right? Where he's like, you've been a bad girl and you're going to get a spanking. Like, I would like to swear about that because that is so ridiculous. And it's like watching like an abusive partner, an abusive parent. Like, it's really like,
it's gross.
It's so gross. And it's hitting like all of these nerves within women who have been fighting so hard just to be equal human beings. You know what I mean? So the fact that there are women out there that don't see this, I don't understand it. I don't understand it at all.
No. I mean, the only thing I always continue to come back to is, this is where, especially within really religious communities that give this like value to kind of like, like traditional kind of motherhood and things like this, and present a certain degree of positive feedback and reinforcement for that role within that community. Like that's I mean, other than that, I can't imagine why on earth right? You'd want to
I
wholesale
know.
hand over your agency, to some. I don't.
Yeah, Handmaid's Tale. Speaking of which, Texas, we just posted an op-ed this morning from a mother in Texas. I think her name is Sarah Harrison, who wrote about how last year she got pregnant and she was 37, and she was pregnant with twins and found out that one of the twins was going to die. And if she didn't abort that twin, the other one was going to die and she was going to die. And guess what? She had to go to Colorado to get this partial abortion to get rid of the twin that died so that she could have a healthy baby and so she could live. I highly recommend it. It's a good, first person. This is how it affects people. But she literally sent it to us because she thinks Pennsylvania is going to make this decision for women all over the country. So
That's awesome that she sent it to there. Yeah, it's Sarah Elaine Harrison. Yep, it just published in the Beacon this morning. Do go check that out. And it reminds me of the other story that I just read. I think it's either last night, this morning, yesterday, something like this, where there was just another case of a woman who lost her life
yeah,
in Texas because she was not given the opportunity to have an abortion. And
right.
so, everything. I mean, if anybody ever thought that there was any kind of, like, I don't know, hyperbolic statements that women are going to die as a result of these things? Well, here you go.
It's
I mean,
real life.
it's real life.
Yeah. And, maternal fatality rates are going up in the states where abortion has been banned or heavily restricted or whatever. I mean, abortion is healthcare, and I think it's really important to keep saying that. Like, number
Yep.
one, it's our choice. Number two, it's healthcare.
Yep.
That is it. You know, um, and I don't want Trump to protect me. You're
Just keep
not.
on coming back to that. Right? I just like
I can't with it. I can't. It's too much.
well, and it's fun. Like I said, I've been like purposely I'm spending a lot of time reading newspapers and articles online and less on the kind of social media stuff, which means I
Yeah.
miss some of the, like, the audio and video of things. And so when I first read that Trump had said that, that was one thing. If you watch the video of
Ugh,
him saying it, the thing is, it's just, it's not just well, I'm gonna, I don't care what they say. I'm gonna help them anyways. It was
right.
not like that at all.
If they like it or not,
Yeah,
you
if they
know.
like it or not.
God.
Like, I mean, that's the kind of controlling little freak. And it's a, obviously this is a really side thing, but saw like in Philadelphia and Oregon, there were these two statues that were just put up. I don't know if you saw this. There's like the little fake statues of Donald Trump that are placed next to statues of women. And the plaque at the bottom of it reads, like, as a recognition of a lifelong achievements in sexual harassment and brutality. So I was like, oh my God. Like, it was an artist that kind of had, I don't know, one out in Oregon and one down in Philadelphia. But it's like that kind of thing. I mean, what's it going to take, right? I mean, just to really see this that clearly. But
I mean, I didn't think he was going to win in 2016 because he said he was going to grab him by the pussy, and he
right.
was allowed to do that. So, like,
Yep.
I didn't think that he was going to get elected then. So here we are again, for 8 years later, right? I,
Exactly. And it reminds me of this. This is one of the reasons why I mentioned that piece by Jamal Bowie in the New York Times today, because he says we're going to be choosing between two versions of things, and he makes this point in that article in the New York Times. He says that, look, the original Constitution, right, was about limiting democratic impulses, right, which was obviously women were not included as having the right to vote. Right. We had slavery, right? We had institutionalized discrimination
yeah,
written into that Constitution.
yeah,
Right. And then he says everything that we recognize today as being about democracy has had to be fought for, that people have fought for over the years, right? And he says this, he says, we were not given a democratic constitution, we made one. We unraveled the elitist and hierarchical constitution of the founders to build something that works for us, that conforms to our expectations. But nothing is permanent. What's made can be unmade. And the foundation of Donald Trump's campaign is a promise to unmake our democratic constitution. And I was like, that's just it. Right.
It
It's
is.
like we're not talking just about like democracy is an abstract concept. We're talking about generations of people who have fought and died and labored to make sure that all of us, right, can take part in kind of self-governance and a better life. And that's what there's at stake in that election. I thought it was just a great piece.
Yeah. And, I think there's one more thing to say about this, which is that um, democracy is participatory. You know, I I read a comment on Facebook today. Someone that said, "I'm not going to vote for either candidate because it won't matter anyways. We're screwed either way." Okay, here's the thing: democracy is representative government, right? And you're not getting your representation if you don't go vote, right? That's how it works. That's the key to the whole situation. The more you participate, the more you get what you want. And so when there's people who are like, oh, well, they're going to do whatever they're going to do, well, that's not true. You could actually be the person elected, right? I
Yep.
am the vice president of my borough council. I make big decisions. We're going to pass the budget for 2025 in, a month and a half. And like, I'm looking at it, the dollars and cents, because I chose to participate. You know, you're there making sure that the elections are secure and that the votes are getting counted. These are all participatory things that everyone should be doing, more than just voting. Like, voting should be compulsory. We put out an article about that this week too.
Yeah, we talked about that on the show last week. Yeah.
Yeah, last week. And that should be the baseline. The baseline is your vote counts. And if you don't vote, then you don't get what you want. It's like that's the way representative democracy works, right?
Well, yeah, and this is what I always say about to like kind of fellow folks on the kind of the broad left, right, who might have that kind of perspective. I'm like, look, he's like, what you're doing is you're choosing to say opt out of a process so that you're going to guarantee that you have no power in that. And they'll say
Right.
something like, well, yeah, but like neither one of these candidates represent my kind of like special little emotional life, right? And
Right.
I'm like, that's not what it's about. I said,
Right.
here's the thing: is like from a social and any social movement worth its weight in, I don't know, air, right?
Right.
I mean, at all have any kind of understands the fact that if you don't kind of if you're not participating and you're not voting if that you have no leverage with whoever gets in there. Every social movement understands that, look, what our goals are far beyond either one of these candidates, what they were going to be able to do there. Right. But if we
Yeah.
said we showed up, we got you in there, and now we are going to exert our pressure to steer you in the right direction, that's how things work.
Right.
Right. It's not just a consumer choice like, do you want sparkles in your toothpaste or not? And you're
Right.
like, no, I'm going to use my own homemade brand. It's not that. We're talking about self-governance. And like, this is where everyone's got to be a grown up, put on the kind of like, the grown up clothes and get out there and suck it up and then be willing to do the work the day after the election, because
Yeah.
that's really kind of the long-term agenda.
Well, yeah, and I think it's important to talk about how, you know, who the president is. Obviously, we keep talking about it because it's a big deal and it's a presidential election year. But that's like the executive level at the top.
Yep.
That's not your middle management, the people that are actually funding your community, right? So that's where in Bucks County, Brian Fitzpatrick is the guy who's bringing
100%.
federal dollars potentially to Bucks County. He's the one not only voting in Congress for people in Bucks County and a little bit of Monco, but also going and getting funding, federal funding for things, for your local community. And then you bring it down another level when we're in municipal elections next year. Then you've got your, county commissioners and your judges that make decisions about whether laws are legal or not, and then your local electeds, whether it's school board or whether it's, your local borough council or your
Mhm.
township commissioners, like those people are making daily decisions about your life,
Yep.
you know? So that's the important part. Like, it's all of the pieces count.
Yep.
All of them count.
Yep. And it all starts with showing up, right? I mean, it shows
Yeah.
up for that thing. Like if I've seen this and I've heard this actually from staffers on campaigns, and I've also seen this in public forums where you'll have you'll have kind of elected folks up there, both at a kind of like say a county level and then even at a state level is the ones I'm thinking of in my mind, where they've asked people to come up and have all these criticisms as well. Did you vote in the last election? And a couple times that people say no, they're like, then I don't need to listen to you.
Right.
Like literally like that. I've heard campaigns saying like, "Oh, we don't look. These people are not going to turn out, so they can yell all they want, but they're not. They don't show up to vote, so they don't matter, right?" And
Right.
that is like that is the reason we have to. This is why that history of struggle is so important. Is to prove that we matter and that
Right.
we are on everybody's radar.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I went to my first pro-choice women's march in 1992. I was like 12, something like that, 13, in that range. And it was like the biggest march on Washington for women that had ever occurred until I went to the Women's March in 2021.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Was it 2021?
2021, yeah, at the beginning, right after inauguration, right?
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry,
No,
2017.
2017.
2017. Holy
2017.
crap. I make this
Yeah.
mistake all the time, by the way. So that's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, I know. Like we had these 4 years and they were
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah. Exactly.
They were fine.
Totally. Well,
My
on this
student loans got forgiven. You
yes.
know, I mean,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, that had no impact on your life though. So,
we had literally me and my husband both had our student loans forgiven, and it was a huge impact on our lives,
yeah.
you know, because it's something that you're drowning in. It was unfair in the beginning. There was too many, you know, added interest rates, and they had sneaky systems so that you thought everything was fine, and then everything was compounding, and then it was twice as much as it was when it started, you know. So I was happy to have Joe Biden as my president.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'll say to anybody who says like, look, I definitely wanted Joe Biden to drop out of this race, but I will also say at that in the same breath that he's the most progressive president we've had of our lifetime in terms of what policy and the impacts on everyday people's lives, hands down.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's just like in ways that I did not expect at all when he took
Yeah.
office, and that's because people were there, showed up, and had influence on the policy and direction.
Yeah.
But what happens? Let's go to go back to what you were just kind of talking about. But what happens when your constituents are not the actual people that live kind of in your district or live in your kind of area? But turns out that there's a few handpicked billionaires that are kind of funneling you from like out of state, who knows, out of country, whatever. There's a great piece that Kirsten Zolfel just had published in the Beacon on the Brian Fitzpatrick's money. And then she tells us in here that only 1% of Fitzpatrick's money comes from small donors, while 92.5% come from out of state. And even in that article, she breaks it down even further and saying, given that the number of people in the state that are contributing, we know there's big contributors here, it's potentially the case that one or two people represent 99% of the in-district contributions to here. Could you talk a little about her piece? Because I'm so glad you said, hey, look, we should be talking about this today because that piece is amazing.
Yeah. So like the 1% that are small dollar donors, I don't know if you remember Fitzpatrick 6 months ago, 4 months ago, I don't know when it was. He actually did a whole thing that was like, just send me $1. And the whole reason was because he didn't have any small dollar donors. So a small dollar donor is less than $200, like less than a $200 donation, which is probably what you and me, when we
Yep.
donate to campaigns, it's somewhere in that range, $50
Yep.
here, $100 there. Yeah. So that's 1% of all of his donors. And then like the donors in Pennsylvania, one zip code is Newtown. And there happens to be a wealthy gym owner there in Newtown named Jim Worthington, who everyone knows supports Fitzpatrick, right? And everyone knows he puts money in GOP politics, right? So out of the donors in Bucks County, there's like this concentration that's like, oh, there's this one zip code. We know who it is, right? Like,
Yep.
We likely know who it is. But then like his biggest donor is the No Labels PAC, which
Yep.
is as part of it's like the Problem Solvers Caucus. He's supposed to be this, the moderate, uh, most moderate Republican in Congress or something, the most bipartisan.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Which Kirsten Zolfel has like basically made an industry out of like undoing that claim, which is pretty, man, seriously, she's been like so amazing in that.
Yeah. But there was even like, so the problem is it's a super PAC, right? I think that No Labels is a super PAC. So the problem is you can have all sorts of dark money in there. And there was this conversation that she mentioned in it where the people who run the No Labels PAC said, "Oh, we just raised, $550 for Fitzpatrick and it took us a week." Like, I mean, it blows my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and then who else? It's like Mike Johnson's PAC
Mm-hmm.
and Kevin McCarthy's PAC. These are like his major donors, is like the leadership, the right wing leadership of the Republican Party, not any like moderate,
Yep.
moderate donors. There are none. Yeah.
It's incredible. I mean, you think about, I mean, that is, I mean, it in other contexts that would be enough to like sink a campaign. But like we've said like multiple times before, is like what that kind of money gets you, and what somebody like a supporter like Jim Worthington gets you, is it gets you a top-notch public relations campaign.
Right.
Right. So all you do is you do branding, right? And you do image stuff, and you take votes that are going to support that branding or image. It has nothing to do with serving your constituents, where the vast majority of time what you're doing is you're voting with those very restrictions, those very problematic votes, the very problematic policies that people will like say, Donald Trump is going to do this. Well, guess who's his right-hand man, right? It's Brian Fitzpatrick with his quote unquote no labels problem solvers like cover, which all that is a public relations scheme.
Yeah, it really is. And I think that if there's anything that the Beacon has tried to do since we've been around, it's to dispel the myth that Brian Fitzpatrick is moderate. His votes even out, right?
Mm-hmm.
But as it's always important to say, he's voting for the ones that the Democratic ones that he knows won't pass.
Yep.
But when the Republicans need his vote, he votes Republican, and that's how he gets that balanced voting record. It's tricky, it's sneaky, and he has strategists that he pays a lot of money for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he doesn't need to be some kind of like, like brilliant kind of like, worker of all the machinations of the machinery. No, he just pays people with all this freaking money to do this, and they tell him what to do. They said, okay, this one, you should take this one. You should take this one.
Right.
I mean, and he's, look, the guy is polished about being able to kind of give like, pat answers to things when he's interviewed to sound moderate, right? He's got the language down, but his votes belie kind of like any kind of representative background. And the fact that he hasn't shown up for any town halls, he hasn't showed up for any kind of debate, because that's not his constituency anymore. His constituency are where the money lies, right?
Yeah.
And that's the bottom line.
Yeah. We live streamed Ashley E. Haas's candidate forum.
Yep.
Was that last week? The days are all
it was last week. Yep.
At this point.
Yep.
Yep. There's like something new every day. It's crazy. So we live streamed her candidate forum on there that Fitzpatrick did not show up for, or even respond to the New Pennsylvania Project. He didn't even respond to the invitation.
Yep.
Like, the New Pennsylvania Project is a great nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that is trying to register more voters all across Pennsylvania. And they're trying to create, high information voters. And, Fitzpatrick didn't think it was worth actually responding to the invitation for the seat he holds.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
But
Yeah.
you can check that out on our YouTube channel as well. We still have it up there, and I think we have it a couple other places too. We've made some clips.
Yeah, clips that have been kind of coming out on social media and stuff of some of that. I mean, it's worth watching the forum too as well. I mean, Ashley Ehas is just, I mean, look, she's a great candidate. She's a great candidate, and she's willing to respond to folks across the spectrum. She'll answer anything, right? She's
Yeah,
like, and she shows up.
right.
She shows up. I don't know what I don't know what to tell you. I mean, it's like,
What do you think is going to happen? I mean, like, let's level with each other.
yeah, let's do it.
What do you think the voter turnout is going to be in Bucks County? It's going to be high, right?
Totally, 100%. Yep.
Yeah. So the thing about Fitzpatrick, right, that we always talk about is that people split their ballots where they'll vote,
Yes.
for a Democrat on the top and then vote for Fitzpatrick. Do we think that's going to happen again this time?
All right. I have a split read. One, when it's like this, I think yes, it's going to happen, but number two, it's not going to be as prevalent as it has been in the past.
Right.
So I really think that, and I think it really comes down to abortion,
Yeah.
and it comes down to like turnout for like the strong, more informed anti-Trump vote.
Right.
So I mean, I think we're going to see that, like, but where, you know, I do believe there's going to be some Bucks County Republicans that will vote for Harris. That I think that they're been burnt too much, and I'm talking to some Republicans who have been in the Republican Party for quite some time. They sucked it up for a couple elections, and they're like, I can't do it anymore. I just cannot
Right.
do it anymore. This is a bridge too far. However, I think those are going to vote for Fitzpatrick. So
Right.
I think they will definitely split their vote when it comes to that. However, but on the Ashley Ehas side of it, I think that there are people have done a really good job. Ashley Ehas has done a really good job on it. Obviously the Beacon has done. There's been more reporting. There's been more conscious raising about what Fitzpatrick has been doing. And then if you're showing that kind of what the overturning of Roe v. Wade, the consistent policies, the story after story that's coming out about the kind of like the deaths and the impacts on kind of women's lives in these states that have kind of revert or have abortion bans put in place and everything, that's going to matter.
Yeah.
I don't, and I think that, I mean, what I can't tell is how deep that goes.
Right.
Right.
I think that's the big question, right?
Yeah.
Like, is this are women going to turn out and vote for women? That's
I
I
do think
think
that's a
that's the
lot.
big
Yep.
question, Do
Mhm.
you get Harris, Ehas, Harris, Janelle Stelson against Scott Perry? Like we have like there's these races happening that
Mhm.
if women show up in big numbers to vote for women, it's going to be crazy, right?
Well, totally. I'll share this. I didn't put this in notes, but in my state house district is Eleanor Breslin, right?
Yeah.
As she's running, she's again a fantastic candidate, and
She's
she
so
knocked on my
fantastic.
oh yeah, she knocked on my door 2 days ago.
Yeah.
Right.
Nice.
Or it was like yesterday actually, because I had to take my daughter to a doctor's appointment, and so I was home and I was home yesterday, and so I happened to be home when she came knocking on doors, and so we talked for a little bit, and she's like, one, just awesome candidate across the board. Before I even met her, talking to her person, and said they are on pace to be knocking 20,000 doors, right? That they have, and she's and she was saying, she's like we've had such great support of people coming out of the woodwork to want to help and go knock on doors. They're talking about knocking, I wish I could remember exactly the number, but several thousand doors just this weekend with
Yeah.
people coming out. That is huge. That's,
Yeah.
I mean, and
Yeah.
again, she fights the uphill battle of name recognition,
Yeah.
and a person like Shelby Labs, who just basically can get us like be like, we're just here because we want to help everybody. Meanwhile, she's like voting to take away women's like reproductive rights, right? Voting to kind of like turn back the clock on kind of like democracy. But she presents a nice face, right? She comes up and she knows what to say. Like, it says all vacuous things, but
Right.
So I mean, that's what she's up against, but the turnout game is pretty freaking impressive, I have to say.
Yeah, and door knocking works. Um, I actually think that that is one of those things that, you know, when Obama ran in 2008
Yep.
and was the first candidate to really ramp up social media usage to turn out the vote, I think door knocking started to like, they're like, well, we could spend more money over here and get better results than if we actually go talk to
Yep.
individual constituents. But it turns out like personal touch and door knocking and actually getting to meet the people that you may someday represent is actually the best thing and something that actually will change hearts and minds.
Yeah.
So I it's always good when you hear candidates out door knocking because you know uh, door knocking is such an interesting thing. I do it all. I haven't done it this year because I'm a little busy here running the Beacon, and I feel kind of bad about it. A couple years ago, I door knocked with Eugene DePasquale. Um, Speaking of other candidates, he's great and so smart
Yep.
and so down to earth. And I think that's another thing is when, you know, everyone might be sick of the fact that every news organization, every political candidate, every surrogate is coming to Bucks County and everywhere else in Pennsylvania. We might all be sick of it, but it's also great, right? That we have
Mhm.
such an important piece in this historic election. Um, I mean, I will say Doug Emhoff was door knocking like one town over from me last week. Like literally door knocking. I was like, really? Can you imagine if you're just sitting at home and the second gentleman just like shows up at your door, like to tell
Like,
you about his wife?
exactly, exactly.
I just love that. I love,
Yeah.
you know,
I think what's also underappreciated about door knocking is like one. I agree with you. It can change hearts and minds, right? When especially when these campaigns. Like I know this has been true with Eleanor Breslin's campaign. It's been true. I mean, when Gwendolyn Stoltz ran in my district, like in 145th, right before she was doing the same thing. She spent time early and often. Ashley Ehaus is doing the same thing. So having the opportunity to come back to people or spend the time and actually have the discussions before it's just like the last weekend and then a weekend like this, right before the election, part of what the changing of the hearts and mind is like just convincing it, no, it's worth showing up.
right.
Right. People who may already agree with the issues already are, say, registered even Democratic voters, or maybe have voted in the past, but are inconsistent voters saying it's worth, right, your time to get out of your house and go to your polling place to vote.
Yeah.
Right. If you haven't already handed in your thing, it's worth going to the drop box in the library to do that, or go to the polling place and surrender that ballot and kind of cast that actually in person ballot or bring it to the election. It's worth that because that is the turnout question. It's also getting those folks who are going to like, oh man, I'm just tired today. Saying, you
Right.
know what? It's worth your time. It's worth your energy to get out there. And this is why.
And I would say this is, this weekend is GOTV weekend, right? Get out the
Yeah.
vote weekend. So it's important for everyone that's watching uh, to be nice to those people who are taking time to volunteer for democracy.
Hmm.
Like be nice. Let them know if you voted or if you're planning to vote, because they're trying to get accurate data. You know,
Hmm.
they're trying to know that they've reached someone. Like, don't not answer the door. Like, if they're not selling anything. You know,
Yep.
they're not selling anything. They're your neighbors. You know, they're
Yep.
your neighbors, and they want to make sure you go vote because that's what we need to do for democracy.
Yeah, and this is what this is my shtick with folks that come to knock the door is like, especially for I wait for who they are, right? I want to know who you are, right? And then say, okay, I'm running for. I was like, oh yeah, like when Eleanor Breslin came, it's like, just so you know, I'm voting for you, and I'm voting kind of right up down the ballot on this right here. To get that out of the way right away, right?
Yeah.
And then you could actually have a conversation about some other things, right? Just so that they know and they've got one of the components of what they need. And then, I say like, again, I say, I say, oh, and I said, you know, in my case, like my wife has like, she has a mail-in ballot that she kind of, she's like, okay, oh yeah, they have data. She's like, okay, no, we've already kind of received that. Okay, it's good to know, just so you know. And then have you talked to these people, and these people, right? Who I know who are also Democrats, are also planning on voting, that she may not have had on her list, just to make sure that if I know I have personal relationships with some people, right, that those candidates can go and talk to point them in those directions, to let them know there's some friendly faces around the corner, and that, you know, if they want to go and show up. And they, you know, and again, in this case, like Eleanor Breslin, there in person saying, I was like, have you talked to them? She's like, oh yeah, I've talked to them. I've talked to them. So it's
Yeah.
good stuff.
Yeah, good stuff. Yeah. The Republicans never come to my door anymore. Once you get that like super voter designation as a registered Democrat,
Mhm.
like I'm one of those they're not gonna they know they're not gonna sway me and they don't want me to turn out to vote. So
Yeah,
the
I'm in this
nomination
weird.
means they won't be at my door.
Yeah, I'm in this weird position because somewhere over the past like 8 years, I'm pretty sure it's somebody who was just like, who was out canvassing for Republicans, who just wasn't doing the work, was just kind of say, I talked to this person, talk to this person. Somehow I got on a list that like says that I'm a Republican voter, right? And so I get all their mailings and I get all this kind of stuff right here, right? And so like on occasion, one of them will kind of show up. And I think that I've had a like an interesting number of Democratic candidates who showed up my door this year. So my guess is somehow that data error has made it back into, so they just want to make sure, you know, like, wait, we have this kind of weird thing going on, you know? And I was like, oh no. And I tell them that story too as well. So whatever data you have here, just so you know, this, you know, somebody made an error somewhere along the way.
Right. Update my minivan with the correct information for
Right,
me.
exactly. So two things before I let you go. I know you've got a ton of work on your plate. Other things go on here is like, one, I am curious what your take is on, we see, you know, again, the Beacon's been reporting on this too as well, about some of the lawsuits, and some of the misinformation that seems to be going forward. We know that the post-election period is going to be as important as the pre-election period, for here. Or I think we'd say, we don't know, capital N no, but we suspect that's going to be the case. How are you thinking about the impact of all that stuff? I mean, are you kind of gearing up for the long haul and say this is going to be that way and this is going to have an impact? Or I'm just curious of where your take is on that.
Yeah, so as I said earlier, we have these partnerships with some big organizations that are trying to help with all of our election coverage. And I think it's the Knight Foundation. I don't know. There's a couple of them involved that is having a resource area for us on the internet that's called Election Urgent Care.
Hmm.
So we're going to have access to resources like attorneys and experts on election law and stuff like that. So in case there starts to be lawsuits and misinformation about voting and what's going on with the election, we have like a massive amount of support from national organizations to help us get the correct information out to people in Bucks County.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I just like, people, I'll say this to everybody too, as well, is that it's a great idea to, like have know where if you see anything, you run into any problems, know there's places that you can go, to kind of report this stuff. Know that if you're going out to vote, right, and that you run into any issues in the polling place, make sure you talk to the judge of elections there, and make sure that you kind of like walk through the process. Do not leave if somebody outside is saying that you can't do X, Y, and Z. Talk to some of the election officials inside to make sure that that's there. If there's any problems that you're witnessing intimidation that's happening outside here, you can tell the judge of elections inside the polling place. A lot of polling places, mine being one of them, has a constable that is stationed there, that to make sure that they're reporting it to them, and then also to call the board of elections and let them know that there's these issues and some other kind of the kind of voter reporting areas. I mean, it's just like, that's where we can not just be, thank our poll workers, but also assist in the protection of that space.
Yeah, I mean, judge of elections are super important for that, so thank you for doing that. There's also usually at most of the polling places, there's going to be representatives from your local Democratic committee, and some of them are probably representatives of the county party. And it being Bucks County and this big ass election, there's probably going to be state party people
Yes.
at some polling places. So once you talk to the judge of elections and make sure, like, if you need to do a provisional ballot, if there's some problem with your name, if they think you're at the wrong place, there's also going to be resources outside from your party, beyond the judge of elections, who's the person who can actually do something.
Yes.
There's other backup there too. We face it like every year when I volunteer. There's always someone who, I mean, I just send people all over town because they're at the wrong
Hmm.
polling
Yep.
place. But there's people who have moved and then their registration isn't right, and there's various things that happen, and it never fails, but that's why it's important to have all of these different things in place to make sure everyone actually does get to vote.
100%. And I want to give just like, also a huge shout out to the folks that work at the County Board of Elections.
Yeah.
I can tell you what blew my mind when I first started becoming a judge of election. And, I just, there's certain things that I just was unfamiliar with and wasn't sure how to handle it. And so I
Hmm.
would, they give us a list literally of 7 or 8 phone numbers to call, right,
Hmm.
with questions. And unlike when you're trying to kind of like call the power company to find out a problem with your bill,
Yeah,
I call the number and somebody picks up
it's a
like
real
after
person.
three,
Yeah.
yes, like after 3 rings, an actual person that's not going to direct me to the next office, but is actually going to help solve my problem. Right. And I said, hey, listen, this is a situation. What do I do in this situation? And they tell me. Sometimes they'll get on the phone at times with the voter if there's a particular issue. You're trying to verify what's going on, all for the purpose of making sure that that person gets to cast a vote.
Right.
Right.
Oh, and in the terms of casting a vote, I think it's really important to remind people, as we're going into probably a very high turnout election, since this is a presidential election, we haven't had one for a couple years, you might forget the long lines. If you're in line at 8 o'clock at
Yes.
night, you're allowed to vote. Do not let them turn you away. Get there before 8 o'clock, but if you're in line at 8 o'clock, you'll get to stay and vote.
Yep. And so everybody, the way it works, just so everybody knows too as well, is that somebody, a designated person, like in our case, it's the constables, that they're at 8 o'clock, they're watching the timeline, right? And then when it turns to 8 o'clock, they go stand behind the last person in line, right? And they follow that person to make sure that person kind of gets in.
Right.
Right. So that's how it works. Like, so if you show up and you're there at kind of like 7:50 and you're looking at the line, you're like, oh, I'm never going to get in time. No, you will get in to vote in time, but make sure that you're there in line. Preferably don't wait to that late in the day. Right. I mean, like seriously, as somebody who is going to be up very, very late, like waiting to have to kind of deliver all this stuff and get all that, you go as early as you can. Right.
I
So
will tell
please.
you, the best time to go is in the random midday times.
Yep.
10 a.m., 10:30,
2 p.m.
2 o'clock in the
1. Yep.
afternoon.
Yep. Exactly. Exactly. Exactly.
If you show
Well,
up between 4 and 8 p.m., there's probably going to be a line. And
yes,
wait, it's important to vote. So just keep
100%.
waiting. Don't leave and come back. Just wait in line.
100%. So Emily, it's like 2 things. One, I'll ask you first, like, anything else that's kind of coming up with the Bucks County Beacon, anything else that you want to plug for the Beacon? And then what kind of message do you want to leave people with ahead of this election on Tuesday?
Yeah. I mean, as I said, as a reminder, we're going to have all sorts of AP visualizations of all of the different races in Bucks County on our website, on the voter guide. So check that out on election day. All of AP's race calls will come into our website in real time. So it'll be easier than going to the Board of Elections and, downloading a PDF or whatever.
Yeah, I know.
It's
Been
like
there.
maddening. Yeah, so definitely come to our website for that. And support us. We're spending a lot of time working really hard to try to get everyone super informed. So if anyone wants to contribute, check out all the buttons all over our website. They all lead to our new contribution page. Um, and yeah, I mean, that's what I got on what's coming up with the Beacon. What was my other question?
Any last things any message you want to have to folks ahead of this election?
I know that it's no surprise that, us at the Beacon are pretty sure that Kamala Harris is the right answer. The Washington Post might not, make an endorsement. We're not really making an endorsement because I don't think we need to. It's not really that important. But, as other news organizations decide not to endorse, it's kind of silly. There's a clear choice. Women's rights, democracy, not approving of fascism. But make sure you vote up and down the ticket, for the people who actually represent your values.
100%. And you have a question about who those people are, go to the buckscountybeacon.com and check out their voter guide. They will break it down for you, right? They will kind of show you, not just through kind of like campaign speeches and the language that's put out there, but by actual research, background information, links to articles so you can kind of see for yourself, right? If you have any questions about the stuff, go over, check it out. And that is I'll make one more plug, right? So that's the reason why you want to go to buckscountybeacon.com. You want to hit that big support button right in the upper right hand side, nice yellow, you can see it, right? It's going to stand right out, and make a contribution, because look, this is what the Bucks County Beacon can do with the limited staff and resources and energy that it's got now, right? The more the community that comes out and supports what the Beacon is doing, the more that the Beacon is able to draw kind of and expand its membership and readership and stuff like this. Just imagine like the kind of defenses that we're going to be able to put up for our communities and our democracy. Like, this is where it starts, right? Community-based local news that it is rooted, right? And making sure that it's supporting that kind of, what journalism is supposed to do, right? It's information for the people, kind of for a critical democracy. Get out there and support the Beacon at buckscountybeacon.com. Hit that big support the Beacon up in the right-hand side, and become a matron, like a patron, become a member, become a one-time contributor if you can. Anything that you can do to help support this and help support community-based, independent, progressive media right there on the Beacon. So, Emily, here we go. Thank you so much. Yes. Thank you so much for taking the time today. I know you're crazy busy right now, but I appreciate it so much. And look, I look forward to kind of checking to the Beacon between now and all election day too as well. So thank you for all the work you're doing.
Awesome. Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah, you got it. All right, everybody. This is Kevin Mahoney signing off for this week's. Here we're gonna do This to Me once again. We got this weird little music quirk that's going on, folks. So we're going to figure it out. I swear to God. All right, everybody, take it in. Have a good weekend. Rest up. Get out there, support it, and get out and vote.